Hey guys, I've been a little under the weather lately, so haven't really been able to record some videos I've wanted to. I've got a few big videos in the works, but my voice is still recovering from this flu. So instead of getting those out, I thought I'd make something, easy and small in the meantime. I've been watching tons of anime and actually reading some manga too. I also just moved to a new place, so I haven't really had my PC or internet for some time now. And in the springtime of New Frontiers, one of the things I happened to watch was Promised Neverland. It was pretty good. It's basically the Goonies are in an orphanage and they have to rebel against the evil adults. Classic anime. The CG environments are a little weird sometimes, but even though they commit the cardinal sin of mixing 2D and 3D animation in the same frame, it works pretty well, surprisingly enough. But only for a very specific reason. It has an uncanny valley effect and feeds into the atmosphere of paranoia and lurking fear that you get from the camera angles and framing techniques through the anime. Yeah, it's a horror anime. I've been of the opinion for a long time that anime just doesn't lend itself to horror very well. It always comes off as silly and laughable, just look at another. Or how about Mayoiga or the king of comedy itself, Osama Game? Neither of the boogie pop anime did much more than instill a sense of immeasurable boredom in me. Boogie pop is hugely influential on Japanese pop culture and pretty much began the light novel craze, so the franchise just seems to work much better in novel format. And that's kind of where I think the genre thrives the most. Or even manga. Just compare Junji Ito manga to anime and you'll see what I mean. There have been only a few cases where I think horror actually really works in the medium. I think Urasakai Picnic did wonderful stuff with its atmosphere in a few episodes. The Flip Flappers School episode was amazing, of course. Yamishibai was also very good for the first few seasons. But generally, I think only the vague sense of horror atmosphere can be presented well in stuff like the original Vampire Hunter D, or the Devilman OVAs, Mermaid's Forest, or some other OVA. More of an artistic flair rather than anything truly unsettling or horrifying. Of course, things like Lane excel at an unsettling atmosphere, but that's more abstract sci-fi than horror, isn't it? I guess Wado's Salesman fits, but that's more like traditional folklore about a modern-day yokai that fits somewhere in between Yamishibai and Doraemon. It's not really scary. You just kind of want to see what wild things Moguro is going to do next. Moguro is a modern-day yokai. He's a force of nature that preys on loneliness, on the emptiness of a human soul, and fills it with things like obsession, addiction, narcissism, affection. These are the cures for human loneliness and longing. Sometimes you might think he's just a metaphor or a figment of a person's mind, but then you see he clearly interacts with a world removed from the victim. He's a being that exists somewhere in the space between psychological condition and paranormal entity. He's a yokai, and he exists to fill the emptiness in the human soul. But mostly, if you look up horror anime, you're likely going to find something like Another. And I want to talk about how kusoani these really are, because nobody really talks about this enough, and I don't know when my next opportunity will be, honestly. So, Another is the classic example of the failure of horror anime, but also started this sort of trend of shows that I swear leans into this lack of seriousness in the genre. It's a treat for kusoani enjoyers. Misaki! Mayoiga came much later, but goes off the rails straight away. It's something you watch with a buddy to see, which one of you can avoid laughing the longest. The less said about this one, the better, but my favorite characters are the bus driver and Love Blonde. It's a mystery and things get wacky. Kind of like Bokodake ga Inaimachi, Erased. It fits right in the same genre in my opinion. Even though there's no overt horror. It's still a funky mystery. So if you liked that one, give Mayoga a shot, but just know you're gonna get some But Osama Game? Now that's the king. It topped the charts and views on Nico Nico Doga every week. Not because it was good, oh no. See, Nico Nico is a place that thrives on its community interaction with a video. Kokoski is a meme on there because that's the essence of the community, just showing what they want, wanting to laugh together about things they find. Which is why editing subcultures like Gachimuchi and the cookie fandoms came from there. Cookie specifically was a whole subculture made out of just making fun of an honest attempt at Toho fan content. So when something's popular on Nico Nico Doga, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's the best thing ever. Osama Game became a big show to laugh at with each other.
Well, I hate to admit it, but it looks like I'm not gonna be the winner of the King's game after all. I just wanted to win is all. Because there's no point in playing a game unless you win.
It's a death game or battle royale type anime, which kills off an entire classroom if you don't follow what the mysterious king in the group text message says. Which actually reminds me of a much older horror movie I saw. In that one, if you don't follow what a newspaper says, then everyone involved will die, Final Destination style. It was an OVA from the 80s, but I haven't seen it yet. It was also based off of a manga. So it's pretty similar in style to Osama Game. Now, you might be thinking, since live action is so successful with the genre, maybe if you made these into films, it would be able to be salvaged. But, I watched the Another and Osama Game movies. Anyone who's fans of 80s or 90s horror movies can attest to the fact that the genre lived and died by goofy low-budget productions. But live action also had a string of truly effective horror that was made by talented directors. But this hasn't really happened with anime yet. Maybe because there's a much higher bar for effective talent in animation. What I'm getting at is you need someone like Anno, Oshiyama, or Harada Hiroshi to really push the boundaries of animation into the experimental if you want to use the medium for effective horror. Otherwise it just comes off as laughable and childish when intersected with the simple beauty of average animation. This is why Another and their ilk tend to exaggerate and lean into this over-the-top, zany, subversive attitude for itself. Granted, this attitude has sort of died down as of late with things like Summertime Render, because I think the style of average modern animation lends itself a little bit better to horror elements than it did in the past. Now it's just left to writing a good story and interesting narrative, which is where Promised Neverland shines. I don't really think Promised Neverland broke this tendency, but it did a good job at making me feel uncomfortable and on edge sometimes. Similar to Shadow House, which released later, but Promised Neverland felt a little bit more grounded in reality than that one. Until, well, I saw the wall run, that was hilarious. Yeah, this show doesn't defy my biased expectations for horror anime to be kind of funny sometimes. It also kind of goes over the top with all the gratuitous suffer porn, but it all pays off by the end, when it's used as credence to support this pro-rebellion narrative. That's really what this show does super well. It pays off. Little things you notice left unexplained get used in the climaxes in pretty spectacular fashion. Normal seeming things you see in the first episode get used as a central theme in the story. When Emma says, I felt such a satisfying wave of catharsis. The daytime child playing turns into Onigokoro, the anime, in a really smooth way. Speaking of Emma, I also really liked the characters. Emma is a tomboyish Honoka. Norman is Kaworu without all the homoeroticism.
If they're not doing gay things at each other, then what are they good for?
And then there's Sasuke. I dig him. Not counting their seemingly superhuman intelligence and athletic ability, they really seemed like real children, and I appreciated that. Too much media likes to paint children as either just small adults who are super mature, or as fucking idiots who don't know anything. Promised Neverland hits a nice balance. They have realistic emotional maturity and weaknesses bound to their lack of experience and depth as children, which they overcome through the course of the anime.
Norman has a brilliant mind, but is weak physically. Ray is clever and loyal, but distrusts most of his peers. Emma is smart and athletic, but her weakness is the size of her heart. You get to see all three of them grow as people when they have to confront their individual weaknesses to achieve their rebellious goals against the adults around them in the world that was built for them. Like I said, this anime pays off.
But also, this anime sometimes does give them a bit too much credit. Like I said, it gets kind of laughable when they start doing your Death Note tier planning and bait and switches and stuff, but that also goes for the adults in the show. So, the children doing this seems a little bit more grounded than it actually. Everyone in the world is just a secret light Yagami, and you gotta accept that. With that said, I can understand if someone watches the first few episodes, gets the gist of what's going on, laughs at it, and drops it early. It's perfectly reasonable. As for me, I enjoyed it. It was pretty decent. Aside from all my points earlier, the animation is pretty solid all throughout. The Sakuga generally doesn't really stand out from the rest of it due to the impressive framing techniques and interesting visuals, which I take as what really sold the anime to such a big audience in the first place. Good job. I give it a 4 out of 5, which might be one of the highest I've ever rated a horror anime. I hope to see more like it in the future. But judging how they handled season 2, not really sure this is going to influence much. It's solid, but nothing mind-blowing. Nothing to gawk over like a lot of the fans like to claim. I really have no desire to watch season 2, which I hear is a good thing. The story is complete by the end of season 1 as far as I'm concerned. But for those of you on the fence, thinking about picking this up, I just have one thing to say to you. This is Miracle. Thanks for watching. I'll try and get that big video out next. Sit tight until then. Take it easy.